Welcome to another edition of the Senior Class. In today's show, Brad talks with Chris Carruth, a longtime business development professional within the construction industry. Brad and Chris discuss his own history within business development and also hit several issues specifically for those working within construction. We know you'll learn from Chris's insight on this important topic. Enjoy the show. Hi, I'm Brad Humphrey, and this is the Senior Class. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Chris Carruth. Chris, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Brad. How are you?
We're doing great. Chris has become a good friend and business associate of mine over the years, and is just a terrific BD example of a business development professional in the construction industry. And Chris, before we've got some questions I'd like to share with you and get you to address, would you just give us a little background on where did you come from? What was your background? How did you get into business development?
Brad, thanks for the question. I've been in the construction industry my entire life. My uncle was a bricklayer. I grew up in Central Texas in the late 70s, and my uncle was a bricklayer. I'd worked for him in the summers. And when I was in high school, I went to the University of Houston. I studied construction management. I actually worked out of the Union Hall as a carpenter during the day, and U of H, University of Houston's a commuter school. So I would go to class at night and earn my degree at night and work during the day as a carpenter, doing just about anything you could imagine. So really learned the industry well from the bottom up, and then became, in the 80s and early 90s, was an assistant project manager and a project manager and an estimator and a superintendent and project executive and all those things. So really learned the industry well and loved the industry. It's the only industry I've worked in. In the mid-90s, there was a shift in the way construction was delivered. We, as an industry, started seeing design build and construction manager at risk, allowing owners to choose us in a qualitative manner as much as quantitative. And so that changed the way construction was delivered and how owners bought the service. And so it really was the advent of business development in the industry. I was always interested in relationships with my owners and making sure we satisfied them, and it was a natural transition for me to go from being a project executive to a business development person. So I started becoming a business developer in 1997 with the Haskell Company in Jacksonville, Florida. They deliver services around the country in the industrial and refrigeration industry. And also we were selling schools in Florida. 1996, I think, they allowed construction manager risk as a legal process in the state of Florida. So that was how I became a business developer 20 years ago.
Man, that's awesome. You know, what you shared, that transition, in fact, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you as far as the transition that you've seen, but we'll come back to that in a moment. But what a great history you've actually been in really, in one sense, Chris, you've really been at the forefront of this transition over the last 20 to 30 years from really more of a hard bid only type of environment to negotiated and design build and those kind of things. So what a rich history. Well, man, this really sets us up for the first question. And let me ask you, because of your experience, can you share perhaps 3 to 5 of what I call the most important lessons that you've learned regarding business development as you see it today? What are the 3 to 5 biggest lessons that others can gain from?
Well, Brad, I'll share with you one of the most painful lessons I've learned, and that is to take the troops up the hill with you. And what I mean by that is we get excited as business developers and we find opportunities, and it's a great project and it's a perfect fit, and we tune it all up with the owner and the architect, and we forget to go back home and talk to our estimators and operations folks, and we don't educate them to the degree they need to be educated to go up the hill with us. So you get up the hill, we've got this great opportunity, we turn back around to the troops and say, let's take the hill, and they don't have enough information to help us. And I have to admit, I've done that a couple of times, and so now you don't have the superintendents or project managers you need, or estimating doesn't have the time to take on the project. Now you have to go to the owner and tell him you can't deliver service.
Wow. So you're almost suggesting, Chris, a training of our own internal people to the process and expectations of the customer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bring them along with you. Educate them about the customer. Get them excited in the project. Share your passion with them. We're all very passionate about what we do, and we want to succeed for our companies, and involve them in that succession early on so that there doesn't need to be a go-no-go process. You've had that process as you've educated them about the opportunity. So I call that taking the troops up the hill with.
I love it.
No fun to be on top of the No fun to be on top of the hill by yourself. So that's a lesson I've learned very well.
Wow.
Um, a small thing, but something I really find important and have to work on a lot still today is listening. Listen to your customer. Listen to your operations people. I see that the world is two cells. You have the internal cell and you have the external cell. And the external sales to your customer and the internal sales to your folks, to your operations people when you're estimating folks.
Right.
And you need to do both of them well. And you need to do that, you have to listen. So I want to remind everyone of the 80-20 rule. It's 80% listening and 20% talking. And when you're talking, you're asking the exploratory questions. You're understanding better the resources you have and when they're really available. And what their qualifications really are, and that they're a good fit for this project. And also understanding the owner and what his timing really is and what his budget really is and what his vision is for the project. So a simple rule, but the 80-20 rule is still very, very applicable no matter what you're doing. Educating your internal resources, your external resources, or talking with your wife. It's always good to
Thanks for that subtle reminder. As far as listening to the customer, Chris, I think that's always, the customer is always many times willing to talk. What about dealing with the internal? This is still underneath that first question umbrella, but what about the internal people on our own company? I find that sometimes our hardest people to convince or to spend time with are the internal people, the estimators, pre-cons, superintendents, PMs, who are obviously working probably on other projects. How do you gain that time with those? Because I think that's sometimes the hardest challenge.
Well, Brad, that's a great question. And again, the internal cell is more difficult than the external cell. So I'll share one of my other tidbits with you. They have to know you care before they care what you know. And so your operations people and your estimators, they have to know you care about what they're doing, about what their life is like, about what their constraints are, and you have to integrate yourself into their process. I'll be candid and say that BD people can be seen as aloof. We're pretty independent. We're going to do our deal. And we have to ensure that we present to our internal folks that we are one of them. We are part of the process. We're there to help them and help them be successful. And we care. And it's not just out playing golf and doing dinner and those kinds of things. It's building relationships internally and externally. So never lose sight of the importance of the internal relationship. It's the key to your success. So let them know you care, and then they'll care what you know.
I appreciate that. That's great advice. One of the things that's come up so much in our industry in the last 5 to 10 years, and probably really more last 5 to 7 years, has been this whole technological advancement, especially with things like BIM and those kind of things. How do you incorporate some of that into your relationship building, and how do you find that you try to leverage those types of tools to better understand our customer and maybe using that as a little bit of a segue between the internal people and the customer?
Brad, that's exactly right, and I like the word you use to describe BIM. BIM is a tool, much like all the other tools.
Right.
You look at yourself as you're a BD guy, but imagine you're really a carpenter and you have a toolbox, and in your toolbox is your marketing department, your BIM department, your estimating department, even your ops folks. And how do you best use those tools? Where are they applicable? How do they fit the owner's needs? and how can you apply them to be successful. And BIM is the latest tool that we put in the toolbox, and so there's a tendency to want to oversell it, maybe to someone that's not as interested in buying it. So qualify your buyer, understand their interest in the tool. There's lots of features of BIM. You can use the whiz-bang models and draw them in that way. A lot of the owners are interested in the clash detection features, where you minimize disruption out in the field and you build it in the model, and you have your shop drawings modeled so that you gain efficiency. So understand BIM as a tool, and how do you best use the tool to the benefit of your own.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good. I appreciate you confirming that, because I know that's been it is a big thing in our growing industry, and so many organizations are looking at it. In fact, a lot of customers are almost requiring it in some of the expectations they have for a construction project.
That's correct. On the public side of the business, in the higher ed department, and in some of the healthcare industry, BIM is a required feature, and the sophistication of those construction projects lend themselves to the benefits of BIM. So you're exactly right. There is some mandatory requirements now in the industry to provide BIM services.
Chris, some of the things underneath is still that thought of that maybe some of the more important lessons you've learned, in your own BD experience. Let me give you a situation. I just hired a new and younger business development professional, or maybe I've just been promoted and I'm listening to this. What might be some areas that would benefit that less experienced professional to learn and really get grounded on that could help them in their experience, especially in the first year or so of their career?
The process is somewhat lengthy as you start your BD career, because there's so much to learn, and you have to remember we are selling a service. It's a professional service, and to sell a professional service, you have to know it and understand it. So I recommend the first several months getting to know your product. What vertical markets is your company expert in? Is it industrial, big box retail, hospitality, multifamily? And then understand that product. How does it go together? How is it built? And then who are your people? Go get with your marketing department and get a copy of the resumes of your project managers and your superintendents, and read those and read them again, and understand the strengths of your people. That's what you have to sell. And so you have to understand the product, i.e. the people and their strengths, so that you can best apply them to the owner's needs. So understand your product. How does it go together? Go out on the job sites. Have the superintendent walk you around and see how the product goes together. Dig into the blueprints a little bit so you learn the language, and then understand the people and who you're selling and when they're available, and so that you can apply those folks the best. And then just understand the process overall. How does your company do business? How does the project go through the process of your company, and how do you execute it? Do you have BIM? Is that a tool you have? So you need to understand how the project will go through your process and how that execution will occur, so you can articulate that to your customer effectively and correctly.
That's great advice. One of the things that is just struck me as you were talking through there is the emphasis you provide in terms of really know your product, it's a service we deliver, but really know the product of that service, our people and our processes to deliver. And you came from obviously what I would call, I call you guys like you, Chris, blue bloods. You guys you grew up in construction, you were exposed to it. I mean, you had to go through a learning process as well, but you were exposed to it. There was not a whole wall you had to climb. What about the young guy or gal that gets into business development that really is more sales-oriented, salesperson profile versus more understanding of construction? I mean, it's not impossible for them to learn this industry, but they've got a little extra homework to catch up on, don't they?
They do. I was in a training session 2 weeks ago I'm in a peer group, and I was fortunate enough to join one of our peer group companies going through some sales training. And they have 2 or 3 national account executives that do not come out of the industry. And we had a chance to chat